ancient warriors, prophets, kings, politics, conspiracies. No, this is just thousands of years of truth and history. It's the Word of God. And I'm Wade.
And I'm Jen.
And join us as we add oil to our lamps, learning from and applying the Holy Scripture to our lives. As we set out in a dark world and uncover the things that want to remain hidden by shining the light of Christ. Awake, O sleeper. This is Out of the Darkness. That's right. Awake, O sleeper. With all the chaos going on out in the world, with everything happening around and about, to the left, to the right. Still got Jen and I here. Ready to crack open the Word. Unleash the sword of truth out there. Because that's what we need in this day more than anything. The sword, which is the word of the Lord. There's so many distractions out there right now. There's so many things that are trying to weigh us down. So many things trying to burden us. So many things trying to get us to become a victim of fear, of that worldly fear, the fear of man, the fear of all these things, the fear of the uncertain. But what we know and what we hold on to is the truth. And the truth is that Jesus is coming back. And when he comes back, everything will be set as the way it should have been. And this is Wade.
And I'm Jen.
And thank you for joining us for the Out of the Darkness Ministry podcast.
Woo!
I know, I like our intro music a lot.
I know, I was like jamming out as I was listening to it.
If I had a lighter, I'd do like the little lighter thing. How you been doing?
You know, I've been doing all right. When you was talking about distractions, I was thinking, yep, that has been my week, full of distractions. But I have been reading in Philippians, so I just finished that up. And then now I'm going to be going to... I'm not sure yet what the next one I'm going to go to. What about you?
I've recently finished up 1st and 2nd Kings. And while I do that, I do my kind of corresponding, I'll read what prophets were prophesying during the time of whatever king I'm reading about. And I did that while I was reading Kings, except for Isaiah. I'm only about 16, 17 chapters into Isaiah. Otherwise, I was trying to, pick where I was going to go next in my personal reading. I'll probably, since I have this really cool chronological Bible, because I've been spending a lot of time in the Old Testament, and in our shows, we've been spending a long time in the Old Testament, going through Samuel. I think I'm gonna head over to Acts, because what's really cool about this chronological Bible, and I think maybe I did this a year or two ago, is as you go through Acts, the epistles will be spread out in there, and so it's kind of cool because that helps get some real good context and background when you're reading in the epistles, so that you're not going all willy-nilly and creating an entire doctrine out of one verse, out of one epistle, in one chapter.
Yeah, I think that'd be a cool like show to do. Sometime after Samuel, it'd be like go through Acts in the chronological and kind of that'd be pretty interesting.
It would be.
Oh my goodness. Spoiler? Maybe? Who knows? But yeah, so you're going to be going to Acts, and I have been in the epistles, so I'm trying to get all those done, and then I'm going to go and probably read the Gospels and then Revelations. That's my revelation. That's my my goal, and then hop back to the Old Testament. Maybe go from Genesis and see how far I can go. So, my other Bible, I went from Genesis to like First Samuel, and now I might pick that back up in First Samuel. I'm not sure yet. I'm just trying to, like I've listened to the whole Bible and I've read the whole Bible, like bits and pieces, like at a time, but I think it'd be cool to kind of go, from Genesis to Revelation, but be pretty hard to. So,
yes, it would be. People can do it front to back like a book, but my mind is not like that.
Well, that's why I'm like just going through the like epistles, and then I've read all the Gospels, and then after the epistles, I might go through the Gospels again, and then I want to like slowly go through Revelation because it's been a little while since I read Revelation. But when I read like super slow, and I try to like absorb it all and break it down, and go read the chapter, read it slow, and then think about it, meditate on it, write notes about it, and then it's really hard for me to just read the Bible, like I don't know. Since I've been doing it slow, like I feel like I get a lot more out of it when I do it slow and just think about it and like look at the contrasts, the cause and effects, and just think about it and meditate on it.
Yeah, I think I'm the opposite. Huh? I think I'm the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I just like to sit there and read. And I came home one night and I just read Amos, right? And I just read it just to read. I don't know. I just read through it. I have my times where I have each little verse or chapter. So I like to take, when I do that, I like to read about the book. Like if I'm in a certain book, I like to read about the book, the history of the book, the time period, who's involved, the society at the time, all of that stuff for me. And then it starts painting this little picture, or we start sculpting, in the clay, and I get a better picture. And some of these things that they're talking about, I'm able to start relating to, maybe stuff that's going on today, right? Because I want to be like you. I want to pay attention to the context of Scripture, right? I want to be doing our exegesis instead of our narcigesis, right? But we have to be able to apply the text for our lives, right? And so that's why I have all those Reader Digest books, and I'm so old school, even though I'm not an older person. I'm old school in the way I do things because I haven't even utilized some of the cool Bible software that we have. I'm just not techie. But, I love getting out these encyclopedias and dictionaries and all these books and everything.
And just, holding it.
Holding it and,
flipping through the pages instead of, scrolling.
Lugging. And I love to lug around 70 pounds worth of books. And I love me some picture books. I like seeing pictures. But yeah, so like I just have a different way of studying, I guess. But I think to go back to something earlier, distractions. And talk about distractions. I don't like to date our podcasts. I don't like to like, oh, it's this season or whatever. I want people to be able to listen to anyone at any time, right? Not have any. That's why we don't cover like news topics a whole lot or anything. Or I'm very vague when I'm talking about the craziness going on, and hopefully that's applicable to whenever anyone picks up, the podcast and listens at any time.
Well, the world is crazy as it is, like
any time can be crazy. But if anyone's currently listening, they know what craziness I'm talking about. But like when it's like around holiday time, talk about being distracted. Talk about being distracted. And like in the West, like our holidays are supposed to be centered around, originally, I guess, kind of centered around Jesus, right? Christmas time. It's about the birth of Christ. Even though, that's just the day, what is it, December 25th. It's the day that we've picked to celebrate the birth of Jesus. But, I think he was more born in the springtime. That's just me. And then you have the obligatory, and I'm talking about holidays in general. I know Halloween's not a holiday, but it's like the precursor. Once Halloween comes in, then like, you got your Thanksgiving, you got your Christmas, you got your New Year's, you got Easter coming up, all that stuff. You've got your, where I make my online presence. I scale back my online presence because then I have to hear about how each little holiday has its evils and how, someone has to educate somebody on the paganness of the holiday and, why it's evil to, celebrate Easter, or why it's evil to put a tree up in your house, or why it's evil to go out and get candy and all this stuff.
Well, I'm just going to say this, and Jeremiah was not talking about a Christmas tree. There's that. So I don't care if we get hate mail for that. Jeremiah was not talking about a Christmas tree.
Yeah. And so like people are swayed and distracted in various ways, right? And like me, it's like, celebrate the holiday or not, I don't care. It's what's in your heart, right? It's where people's individual conviction lies, but like some people just sound not happy, and then they have to spread that unhappiness. And then, there's the other people who go through the holidays and it's just kind of a ritual. They're just going through the motions and all of that stuff. And like just observing people and their habits. And, we are creatures. We're animals in a sense, right? And I think of Ecclesiastes and I think of Solomon when he talks about human beings. It's our ability to have consciousness, reason. That's the only thing separating us from the animals. Otherwise our fates are the same. You die and you turn into dirt. It's where that consciousness goes afterwards. And people, when we're operating on a carnal level, We're operating like an animal. We're operating like a naturalist would advocate for, a creature that's habitual, a creature that seeks what satisfies its flesh, food, reproduction, sleep. These are everything that the world and everything that it offers appeals to. And our minds become swayed. Our minds become complacent. And the same thing, along the same lines, the same thoughts, the same frequency, if you will, as the world. And there's not much differentiating us and everyone else from the world. I think that as each day passes and we see more odd things, we see the things that people try to keep hidden become more and more prevalent, conspiracies that are more and more prevalent. Like if you want to talk conspiracy, some of the things that were considered conspiracy a few years ago is common knowledge, right? People talked about a shadow government or whatever. Now you hear about it. It's just called the deep state. Years ago, just a few years ago, the stuff that Hollywood elites are involved with, and politicians and what, you saw that Pizzagate stuff. You saw that spirit cooking stuff. This stuff is in the open now, right? As more of this stuff is revealed, right, people are presented with a choice. And what I see is a lot of people just continuously going with the flow. You would think seeing a bunch of Hollywood stars dining on a cake filled with bodily fluids and made to look like a cadaver, think probably not going to watch a movie with these nut jobs anymore. But we just continue to feed from the garbage, to feed from the world. Or like when you hear things about the politicians and their dealings and workings, and you connect that with missing people's cases and whatnot, and how that gets buried by the media, and how that's all of this stuff. I personally think these things are brought out to the light so that people can make a conscious choice or get woken up in some way. And some people have awakened. I like to say that in the intro, awake, O sleeper. Because that's what people are. They're asleep. And I think there's a lot more members of the body of Christ out there that are just sleeping right now. And sadly, I think there's people out there that just want to stick their head in the sand about some of these things. But we, as followers of Christ, have to continue marching and beating the drum and doing what we've been called to do. Because they want to shut down your church. They want to shut down your stores. You've got a government that wants to tell you if you're essential or not. They want to tell you the things in your life, what is essential and what is not. All of these things, again, try to shape and mold you into a creature of the world, to shape and mold you into an animal, a piece of cattle. And if we are an animal, it should be a sheep. You hear that term sheep, sheeple. See, the thing is, if I'm a sheep, I have a shepherd. And if you are following Christ, you know who the shepherd is. It's him. There's sheep and there's goats. And the goats eat whatever's put in front of them. They'll eat a can if you put it in front of them. They eat the briars and the thickets, weeds. They're kind of a useful tool if you own a bunch of property and you need to clear stuff out. Get you a few goats. But they eat whatever's in front of them. We can't let ourselves be poisoned by the continuous trash that is heaped in front of our faces. There's a way to exist in this world and not be of it. There's a way to walk through this world and not be a part of it. And the way you do that is actually following those simple words that Jesus spoke. Living the word. Being a doer of the word. Because we can exist in this world, but we don't have to be a part of it. I'm telling you that as I'm sitting here in a Batman hat and a Justice League shirt on. A great example, read the book of Daniel. He's in the Babylon. He was ruling most of the known world. He became the second only to the king in that government, the Babylonian government. Daniel, a servant of God. He served God. Daniel, adorned in Babylonian garb, given a Babylonian name, serving in the Babylonian government, but ultimately serving God first and foremost. And that separated him from everyone else. That separated Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. As we read in this episode here, as we read in this portion of the Word, we're going to find little bits and little nuggets. It's going to show us how to exist, how to be like Christ, how to avoid constantly stepping in the pitfalls, or it's going to show us and warn us of how it is when we get caught up in the tangible, when we get caught up in what we can see, touch, taste, smell, and when we react in fear on the biological level, when we operate in fear by the things that we see, when we see the things of man and we become afraid, we see what happens. So we're going to be reading in 1 Samuel chapter 13 today. Yes, we're continuing on in our coverage of Samuel. As we go on in this chapter, I hope to draw parallels from what's happening in Saul and what he's going through, and maybe what some of us are going through in our lives today. So thank you for taking time to listen, and we're going to take a quick little break, and we'll be back. So if you want to grab your coffee or tea, or if you're out there listening on the road or at work, I don't know, happy work. But we're going to take a little break, and if you can, grab your Bible. Babble? Grab your Bible, follow along. We'll be right back. we're back. 1 Samuel chapter 13. When I first did a run through, I was reading, right on the surface, I was like, what am I going to talk about? But the more I started reading and I started looking up ancient swords, just because, I don't know. I was looking in other places and I was reading it more. I was digging in a little bit more. And then, I don't know. Things started to take shape. That's one thing that I always have to work on. It's having the faith that God is going to be liberal with his wisdom. Because remember, if we ask for wisdom, he gives generously. Now I know I'm not claiming to be wise. I'm the opposite of that. Whatever we uncover here, I'm sure those at home, maybe those that are listening, they'll dig even more treasure out of this than we do. And I hope that as we go through this and whatever we uncover, I pray that each of us can apply it to our lives and that it empowers us, inspires us to do what we've been called to do. In whatever form, whatever way God has gifted you to do it. So that's going to be more important now than ever. Spreading the gospel. Whether it's on a street corner, whether it's online, whether it's behind a pulpit, whether it's to your neighbor or to your mother, some form, some way, spread the gospel. Did I time that out with the music good? Oh, I might have. Oh. All right. For the 5th time, I've probably said this. 1 Samuel chapter 13. As the norm, I'll read through the entirety of the chapter. Then we'll go back. We'll start digging. We'll start breaking it down. We'll see what we uncover. We'll see what leaves an impression on us as the Spirit leads. Continued war with Philistia. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 42 years. Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel and sent the rest of the men home. He took 2,000 of the chosen men with him to Michmash and the hill country of Bethel. The other 1,000 went with Saul's son Jonathan to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Soon after this, Jonathan attacked and defeated the garrison of the Philistines at Geba. The news spread quickly among the Philistines. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, "Hebrews, hear this! Rise up and revolt!" All Israel heard the news that Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba, and that the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. They camped at Michmash, east of Beth Aven. The men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves, thickets, rocks, holes, and cisterns. Some of them crossed the Jordan River and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were trembling with fear. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier. But Samuel didn't come. Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away, so he demanded, "Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings." And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering himself. Just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to meet and welcome him. But Samuel said, "What is this you've done?" Saul replied, "I saw my men scattering from me, and you didn't arrive when you said you would, and the Philistines are at Michmash ready for battle. So I said the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came." "How foolish," Samuel exclaimed. "You have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Samuel then left Gilgal and went on his way. But the rest of the troops went with Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. When Saul counted the men who were with him, he found only 600 were left. Saul and Jonathan and the troops with them were staying at Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. The Philistines set up their camp at Michmash. 3 raiding parties soon left the camp of the Philistines. One went north toward Ophrah in the land of Shaul. Another went west to Beth Horon, and a third moved toward the border above the valley of Zeboim, near the wilderness. There were no blacksmiths in the land of Israel in those days. The Philistines wouldn't allow them, for fear they would make swords and spears for the Hebrews. So whenever the Israelites needed to sharpen their plowshares, picks, axes, or sickles, they had to take them to a Philistine blacksmith. The charges were as follows: 1/4 ounce of silver for sharpening a plowshare or a pick, and 1/8 ounce for sharpening an axe or making the point of an ox goad. So on the day of the battle, none of the people of Israel had a sword or spear, except for Saul and Jonathan. The pass at Michmash had meanwhile been secured by a contingent of the Philistine army. How you doing, Mrs. Wife?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Trying not to sneeze.
I know, I was fixing to sneeze while you was reading, so I had to mute for a second.
What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm thinking, I did not realize that Saul was 30 when he became king, and he reigned for 42 years. So that means he was 72 years old.
Maybe.
Ish.
So interesting as I came up when reading in multiple translations. Some will have it differently. There's a discrepancy, and part of the original text is missing because some, in a literal translation or something like that, what I was reading, will have like he became king when he was 1, which makes no sense. Some say that he reigned for 2 years. So some will be like, when Saul was king for 2 years, this stuff happened, right? And some say when he's 30, he reigned for 42 years. They go to Paul. Is it in Acts? Acts chapter 13. Paul talks about Saul's reign and it being over 40 years. Some wonder if that's the figurative 40, because 40, I guess, according to some scholars, I don't know how widely accepted it is because I'm not a scholar. 40 years in Old Testament times or whatever is a term or a saying for a generation. But yeah, I kind of like the combination. So as I was reading and I was thinking about those other translations, because Saul being 30 when he became king, and he was reigning for 42 years. So that 2 in there. Like I said, some of those translations say he reigned for 2 years, or whatever. I tend to take it that Saul, when he became king, had about 2 years of faithfulness before just being disobedient. So interesting that you brought that up, because I was reading about all of these kind of discrepancies about his age when he became king and whatnot. And it's interesting that this is the chapter here where his son Jonathan is first mentioned. And he has to be of some age to be out there fighting.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that.
So yeah. So Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel and sent the rest of the men home. So he got 2,000 men. Jonathan got 1. And I think that as we continue to read, especially in the next chapters, we're going to see Jonathan, I think, being an example of that pure childlike faith. Because Jonathan does have some military wins. And this chapter paints a picture of this Israelite army. And it's interesting, he's got 3,000 special troops. No one's got swords. Saul and Jonathan. The end of the chapter tells you, because it wants to reiterate or reinforce how dire or hopeless their situation looks. In that the Hebrews weren't advanced in metallurgy. So they didn't have iron. The Philistines were more technologically advanced in that. Interestingly, the Philistine, they should have been subdued. They weren't. They grew in population, ended up placing the Israelites in bondage in places. And so they had that knowledge of how to smelt and everything. And when it talks about at the end of the chapter them, the Israelites not having blacksmiths, not being able to work metal, and the stuff they did have, they'd have to take to the Philistines to sharpen. And it gives the little prices. They're inflated prices. They're cheating them, essentially. It's overpriced. And so you could picture some of the hardships too, because these guys probably had farming tools as their weapons. So a lot of these are probably pretty just blunt objects, very dull, right? So I'm trying to picture this army. It says no one's got sword or spears except for Saul and Jonathan. And interesting, when I was reading about swords and spears and all this stuff, swords were kind of a newer thing. Because earlier, swords made out of bronze and all of that stuff would break. And so a lot of the times the sword's not necessarily made for fighting one against one, because they didn't do that for fear of them breaking. They're mostly used for quick attacks or just coming up to somebody and shanking them, stabbing real quick. And a lot of them weren't very long at the time. Again, it wasn't until they started figuring out to make the middle of them thicker. And then when iron started to become a thing, because you see the Philistines, it's going to talk about their chariots and everything like that. Again, this is to paint a picture that this Israelite army in a tangible, physical way, has no hope in, doesn't have a snowball's chance to prevail, to win against the Philistine army. Right? So soon after this, Jonathan attacked and defeated the garrison of Philistines at Geba. This news spread quickly among the Philistines. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land. He's encouraging the Hebrews. Look at this, look at this defeat. Look at this. If we can do this, let's go for it. And all Israel heard the news. Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba. Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. Some translations, it's like the Philistines, the Israelites were like a foul stench. The Israelites are like a foul stench to the Philistines, or a foul odor. It just so like riling up the wasp nest. They're even more angry. So boom, you have the entire Israelite army joining with Saul. And now the Philistines have the whole hive coming up. They've got 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. So by all accounts, the Hebrews, when you're looking at it on paper, doesn't look good for them. But how many times, right? Let's break this down. Let's look at it here. How do we apply that here? How many times does the odds look not in our favor in a lot of things, but God comes through on something? What I see here in this part in this text, okay, as we paint this picture with words, it's giving us the visual. And just on the surface, like, there's no way these guys can win. They're outmatched. They don't have the weapons that they do. They don't have chariots. These chariots were iron. They couldn't match their iron chariots. Interesting that one of the things that God doesn't allow them to have is horses and chariots. But that's to show when they win these battles, it's a divine intervention. When Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines at Geba, it was a divine intervention. God intervened in there. God won that battle. So throughout these odds, again, it's to demonstrate God and his miraculous intervention in the lives of these men. Now, Saul's army, now the whole army, not just the special troops, they're with Saul at Gilgal. They see the 3,000 chariots. They see the 6,000 charioteers and all the Philistine warriors. It says the men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves. They started fleeing.
I was just thinking, wow, isn't that, like, we can look at that in today's terms, like when we go through problems, when we go through things that just seem hopeless, and, like, the enemy is all around, and just, like, how many times do we flee? How many times do we run from the problem instead of going to God about it?
Right, and I think it's interesting here that the garrison at Geba, their defeat, I think it's interesting as I read that what I I get the impression of is the people hadn't given God the credit for that win, and when they are summoned by Saul to join him, and then they actually see everything, see all the Philistines, then they're like, yeah, we're out of here. Kind of again putting their faith in the guy, in the man. And like today, when we put our faith in men, when we put our faith in men and women, we put our faith in politics, we put our faith or try to seek God through man, and when we see that man is just man, again, it's where we can see the people who a few chapters back chose, well, from their hearts, God gave them Saul because it's what the people desired. And we see more of what's within the heart of the people. When they see the insurmountable odds, they go running. Now, that's easy to talk about and say as we sit here today in this time. We're not little Israelites back then and seeing a bunch of Philistines all decked out in their armor and chariots and whatnot. But we can learn. We may not have Philistines surrounding us right now. But you've got those enemies, those principalities. Those are the things that we're fighting against today. Our weapons are spiritual and our battles are spiritual. And those Philistines are around us in spirit. I'm not talking about the spirits of Philistines haunting people, no. But definitely the entities, the things that inspired all of these individuals are still around. Those fallen watchers, those fallen principalities, right? And as things are closing down around and about you, maybe your business has been shut down or your work is closed for a while or whatever, you can look at the predicament that these guys are in. But who did they put their faith in? They put their faith in man. They put their faith in man for comfort. And they heard about one victory and they forgot who really truly brought about that victory. And when the stuff really started hitting the fan and they saw what they were up against, all they could see was what they could see tangibly with their eyes. But they didn't understand the deeper meaning of what's going on. They ran. They ran and fled in fear. And so Saul, meanwhile Saul stayed at Gilgal. Give him credit for Saul. You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like you were saying, they're putting their faith in man, and man is fallen, it's in a fallen state. And, it's easy to read the Old Testament and be like, those silly Israelites, what in the world? Can't they see who's really winning these battles? It's God, but when we're going through things, it's so hard to see, sometimes. And we do the same thing. Like we run or we put our faith in like man, I know I've did that, but really it's easier to see when other people are going through things than when we're going through things. And yeah, we need to put our faith in God because he's the one that fights those battles. He's the one that he, paid the price at the cross and has victory over, that. And we need to understand, he's the one that does the work.
Yeah. And so we'll get prime example here in Saul's leadership of what we tend to do when we, like you said, kind of forget this. And so it says, meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and give him credit for being brave, right? His men were trembling with fear. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier. But Samuel didn't come. And Saul realized his troops were rapidly slipping away. So apparently Samuel had said, wait here for 7 days. I don't know if he said, wait here for 7 days for me, but he just said, wait here for 7 days.
Well, okay. Did Samuel say 7 days? Maybe he just said, wait here. And then by the 7th day.
Well, it says Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier. So I don't know, like how you want to take the sentence. I tend to lean towards Samuel probably said, wait here 7 days. But maybe it's Saul. He's waited for 7 days for Samuel. I get it. I totally get it, yeah. But Samuel didn't come, so Saul...
Because I could see, like... Okay, if Samuel said, wait there for 7 days, and then Saul's waited there for 7 days, and like... I know, this is probably... I'm just like, Or, like, if he did say, just wait there in Gilgal for me, and then it's been 7 days, and he's just like, okay, I can't wait any longer. I'm doing this. Yeah, so.
So as he's waiting, either way, he's waiting.
Sorry, I'm just...
No. Either way, he's waiting, and he's seeing his men are slipping away. They're going, they're running, they're fleeing. It's getting fewer and fewer and fewer. And that's the point where he's like, bring me the burnt offering and peace offerings. And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering. See, what we see here is a lack of spiritual understanding. Saul enacted a ritual. One, he violated the Torah, the law, violated the law because this is something only a priest could do. He didn't understand the deeper spiritual meaning of that. So he thought he could do it. And just reading, he thought it was something he just had to do in order to go and win the battle. I have to do this ritual. It's like we do today. I better get my brownie points in and go to church for the whatever Christmas play, or like when we were going to church, you'd see the attendance like spike Christmas and Easter. People will go to church twice a year, Christmas and Easter. Not saying you got to go to church to the four walls and a roof. That's not what I'm getting at. But like the ritual of it.
So, yeah, like kind of like how communion is done nowadays, That's what it's kind of reminding me of. And like people who take communion, do you understand what that means? Mm-hmm. And so even though this is totally different, that's kind of what it reminds me of.
So it's illustrating a spiritual, what's the opposite of discernment?
No understanding, because discernment is understanding, so...
He lacks spiritual understanding. And that's what essentially Samuel's going to say. So just as he finished that up, there's when Samuel arrives. You know what's something that I was seeing when I was reading this? The parables that Jesus gives, the king goes off. He's going to return, and the servants or whatever are expecting his return. The king in the parables, in each one of the parables, always gets held up, and his coming's delayed. And then they start getting drunk, and they start doing all the stuff, and then the king comes at an unexpected time.
Interesting.
Again, and I always make it, like when you read those parables and you read Jesus talking about these things, and we, wonder about you hear the thing, every generation thinks it's the generation that Jesus is going to come back and everything like that. Every generation thought that. It's because every generation is supposed to think that. Every generation is supposed to be in that mindset. It creates the fruit. It creates a state of being in which you are being a doer of the word, and a natural product of that is you're anticipating it at the moment. You're anticipating your Lord and King arriving. That just puts you in that state naturally. Each generation should think that it's the generation that he's coming back, because that's a natural part of the fruit that is being brought forth if you're being a doer of the word. It's just as Saul was finishing the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to meet and welcome him, but Samuel said, "What is this you have done?" Saul replied, I saw men scattering from me, and you didn't arrive when you said you would, and the Philistines are at Michmash, ready for battle. So, one, Saul already, he makes the burnt offering. Samuel's coming, and he's going to come out and meet him, welcome him. Hey, buddy, again, showing, and we got the impression of that, before when Saul was chosen, because he didn't know who Samuel was. Everyone else around him knew who Samuel was, except for Saul. Again, you get the impression as you read through the text multiple times, get the impression that Saul just kind of doesn't know very much about his religion, his faith. But how much, can you say that about Christians today? Yes.
Absolutely. When I was going to church, and just a little tangent, I taught Sunday school for a little bit. And when I was teaching Sunday school, first of all, I shouldn't have been teaching Sunday school because I was just starting out myself. But the lack of Bible knowledge in the Sunday school where the kids were actually brought up in church, it was very eye-opening, that they didn't really know anything about God, because they were, when it was time for church, most of the time the parents would just say, because it was just a small church, hey, why don't you guys, if you don't want to be out here in church, go in the back room and, be on your phones or whatever. So that was just allowed to do, whatever, and not really be taught the word. So it was pretty much like just the adults and stuff listening to the word, while the kids were in the back, just doing whatever they wanted. And then pretty soon they wanted someone to be in there with the kids to babysit, pretty much. And I tried to teach them a little bit, but I was learning myself. So, just the lack of knowledge nowadays, it was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, and so, we see here, there's no spiritual depth to Saul. He just did this. He violated commandments, the law. And then Samuel arrives. He's like, "Hey, dude, what's up?" Samuel's like, "Dude." Probably didn't go down like that. Like, "Dude, what's up?" And Samuel's like, "Dude, no." But we also see here, I saw my men scattering from me. You didn't arrive when you said you would. So I just see, again, getting caught up. And we see the army somewhat reflective of Saul's spiritual stature. The army and the people are reflective of the king. So they're fleeing. This is all that Samuel sees. He goes through with the offering, not understanding the significance of the offering, not understanding the laws that he's breaking. It's just something, this ritual that he's got to do before he can just go in there and start hacking away. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came. Okay, this compulsion, this feeling, this was the flesh. And it's so, we can compare today when we see things and we give into the fear and then we react. Just like these, the Israelites, when they were not confident and, they didn't even consider God's ability to choose for them another judge. They had already made the choice and decision, hey, we need a king like the other nations that surround us. See, they already went through the planning. They already made up plan A, plan B. God was nowhere in the plans and the decision-making at all. So many times when we get caught up in what we can see, touch, taste, smell, when we get caught up in our own lives, in our own drama, our own world, we make up plan A, plan B, plan C. I'm going to do this after this. I'm going to do this. If this doesn't go this way, I'm going to do this. If this doesn't happen this way, I'm going to do that. And God is nowhere in those plans. Samuel explains, how foolish. And that's the simplest translation. Other translations have something different. But essentially in the Hebrew, that how foolish that Samuel's telling him is in regards to someone who has no spiritual discernment. Samuel exclaimed, you have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. And the Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. Now, what does he mean by, the Lord seeking after a man that's after his own heart? He's seeking after someone who's first and foremost is putting God's will first. It's like in our prayer life and following Jesus and following him. Again, we as Christians, I'll say this on every stream and almost every podcast, Christian, because this is one thing when I was talking to somebody who just couldn't stand Christians or whatever, one of his criticisms was like, people ask, what does a Christian mean? They can't even answer because they don't even know. And that's true. They don't even know what a Christian means. Christian, before, the faith was called the way. But Christian was first a derogatory term, but it was to identify the disciples of Christ. Christians is a follower of Christ, an imitator of Christ. And so, as we imitate Christ, we try to imitate what he did and how he lived. He did nothing of his own will, but the will of the Father. As we take up our cross, as we die daily, that's what we're doing. Dying daily, we're giving up our will, putting God's will first and foremost. When we have our prayer time, that's the time God takes to shape and mold us into the image of his Son, to shape and mold us so that we're operating within the name of Jesus. So the things that we're asking for in the time of prayer are the things on God's heart. Only then are you trying to explain this the right way so no one misunderstands. Only then, when you're in Jesus' name, anything you ask will be given, because that's what's on God's heart.
Yeah, like in John, where it says, anything you pray according to God's will, he hears you. That was a major paraphrase. But you understand.
But that's the gist, right? Less of me, more of him, right? Saul, he's very shallow. Again, we talked about this a few chapters ago. He's tall. He's handsome. He's on the surface what people would look for in a king. But internally, he's shallow. Like people today, right? the handsome, good-looking people, successful people. There's a lot of them that have no depth, have no personality, have nothing. It's just the surface. We kind of see that here. Now God's using Saul, and God's using Saul to deliver his people from the Philistines and whatnot. But through this, God is also trying to illustrate or demonstrate for the people themselves, the spiritual state of themselves through Saul. Okay? We see that he doesn't have a lot of spiritual discernment. And that God is looking for people that are willing to serve him and serve him from the heart. Willing to serve him wholly and fully. And I think that's interesting that I don't see any kind of sorrow or repentance or anything recorded here in this part for Saul. He just kind of goes out. Like, again, maybe there's not much understanding there. Because then it just says, Samuel then left Gilgal and went on his way. The rest of the troops went with Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Saul counted the men who were still with him. He found only 600 were left. Saul and Jonathan and the troops with them were staying at Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. The Philistines set up their camp at Michmash. And then they split up into 3 parties here. 3 raiding parties soon left the camp of the Philistines. One went to Ophrah in the land of Shaul. Another went to west to Beth Horon. And the third moved to the border above the valley of Zeboim in the wilderness. Now, he's got 600 guys. Now the Philistine army is split up into 3. Attacked 3 different angles. Again, to illustrate how much the odds are stacked against them. And then it illustrates, like we talked at the beginning here, they didn't have blacksmiths. The Israelites didn't have blacksmiths. So they've got 600 men. Saul and Benjamin are the only ones with a sword or spear. And then reading on, there's no blacksmiths in the land of Israel in those days. The Philistines wouldn't allow them for fear they would make swords and spears for the Hebrews. So whenever the Israelites needed to sharpen their plowshares, picks, axes, or sickles, they had to take them to a Philistine blacksmith. And this is what I'm thinking the people in the army probably had. Plowshares, picks, axes, and sickles. They had to take them to a Philistine blacksmith. It lists out the charges here. 1/4 of an ounce of silver for sharpening the plowshare or pick. 1/8 of an ounce for sharpening an axe or making the point of an ox goad. But it says, so on the day of battle, none of the people of Israel had a sword or spear except for Saul and Jonathan. And as I was reading that, I was thinking, look, in the time of Joshua and everything going on then, the Philistines were there. And again, they had to either decimate a tribe or displace a tribe. And you know me, I can get into the details of why some tribes needed to be completely annihilated and others were simply ran out. But that's for a different kind of show. Wahaha. But the Philistines, they couldn't quite subdue them. And so the ones that they couldn't get rid of, they just put them in bondage, put them in servitude. But again, we can see, as God was leading the people into the promised land and you had all the different tribes in there squatting on the promised land and they needed to be displaced. You can see, like today, those tribes representing certain sin, certain idolatry, certain things in our lives, right? That if we fail to address, or we think we have it under control without having God be the one to eliminate it, we think we can eliminate it in our own power. We think that we can keep it under control with our own will. It'll grow over time. It'll manifest itself in various ways over time. If that root isn't taken out, if it's not uprooted, it will continue to grow in some way, some form, some fashion. You might not see it immediately. You might not see it for years. If God has not been the one that you let eliminate that root in your life, it'll grow and manifest itself some way at some point. And I think it's interesting here that as the Philistines grew in their power, grew in their numbers, and so they were the gatekeepers, and the Israelites owned land. The Philistines took back their territory, and then taking back the territory, the Israelites had no way to really defend themselves. They took away their ability, or they had no ability to fashion for themselves any weapons of defense. And as I was reading that, I'm trying to think of like how the Israelites were so reliant upon these Philistines that they would go and pay these inflated prices to have their things simply sharpened. That when the day actually came, in the battle against the Philistines, they didn't have anything to battle them with. So as the people, the Israelites, when they continued in the land and let the Philistines exist in there too, and the Philistines are growing in number, the Israelites are reliant upon their knowledge. Now when it comes time, when the Philistine threat becomes so much that they had no choice but to battle against it. Now, after generations, the people's spiritual state was diminished, right? And their knowledge of God was diminished. And so they were left in their own devices and left in their own way of battling against the Philistines under their own power. Or they only sought to fight against the Philistines in their own power, and they had no real weapons to fight them with. When these habitual sins enter our life and we refuse to deal with them, and it gets so bad that we have no choice, and we still don't turn to God, we realize we have nothing to fight against it with. So generations of complacency led to them being defenseless when the time came where they needed to fight. Going all the way back to the beginning of the podcast when we're talking about all the garbage and trash the world is trying to throw our way, shaping and molding us, trying to make us a part of this world, being a creature, an animal of this world, making our minds complacent to the things that we should have subdued, or not us should have subdued, but have let Christ in us subdue. The things residing within us should have been plucked by the root, or should be plucked by the root, or we should be having Christ plucking at the root, because we're still working on things, right? And that's the important thing, is we should continuously allow ourselves to be shaped and molded each day by God, so that we're not left being subdued by the things in our life, the darkness that surrounds us, being subdued. So reading this, like, where are you going to stand? How are you going to stand on that evil day? We have to ask ourselves that. How are we going to stand on that evil day? Are we going to be standing there with a dull plowshare? Or are we going to be standing there with the sword? I'm talking about the sword that is the Word of God. The sword, that's double-edged sword that's sharp enough to pierce joint, marrow, down to the very soul. Years of giving in to complacency, years of giving in to the darkness, years of giving in to the Philistines in our lives will stunt and dull our weapons of warfare. Let's stand there on that evil day with our sword at the ready. And until the next chapter, because they're surrounded, it ends at a cliffhanger. But thank you for spending time with us. This has been Wade.
And this is Jen.
And this has been an Out of the Darkness Ministry podcast. And if you need a free Bible, hit up www.outofthedarknessministry.com and request your free Bible there. Join us on our YouTube channel, where we do a live stream every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Get to interact with us, chill with us, hang out. It's fun. But until then, thank you all. I pray that we walk through this world with our lamps lit. We increase in wisdom.